I'm just planning on starting uh, at the beginning, and we can start with your childhood, um, and then we'll just go from there, and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, and we don't have to talk about whatever you don't want to talk about.
All right.
All right,
All right.
here we go. Thanks for doing this, Grandpa Tim. I guess we could just start wherever you want to start in your childhood. You can take it away.
Okay. As you already know, I was born in just as World War II started. Um, you don't remember this, but Germany invaded Poland in 1939. I was 3 years old at the time. Didn't mean anything to me, but from the time I was born until I was 9 years old, the only thing the United States cared about was war. And while I was too young to be afraid.
Yeah.
The anxiety level in the town and on the street was palpable. And it turns out that we had a number of Jewish families living on the street, and also a number of German families. And the son of the family next door to us, was a co-pilot on a B-24 bomber and got shot down just right in 1941 when we first started bombing Germany. And the whole community kind of rallied around this family.
Yeah.
Even though they were Germans.
Yeah.
My father was a warden for a while, and every night we had to cover all the windows with blankets so that they were afraid there was German aircraft could actually see lights around Boston and bomb it.
Wow.
And they found evidence of German submarines outside of Boston Harbor, and in fact they sank a couple of cargo ships that were leaving Boston for England. And there were probably 6 or 8 17 or 18-year-olds who were drafted, and each of those households had a flag with a blue star on it, showing that they had a boy abroad, either in Asia or Europe. And the mothers in those houses were always waiting for a letter from the State Department or Department of Defense,
yeah,
saying he's gone,
yeah,
or we can't find him. And fortunately, that never happened, but there was a lot of anxiety about that. And we were right near the Watertown Arsenal, and a lot of the officers working there rented houses on the street. And my father taught all these colonels and generals living around how to play cribbage. so it was often that they, were sitting down here with Commander Nimitz or whatever, playing cribbage in my living room with my father. So anyway, we got through that. And the war was over, and it changed things dramatically with all that tension gone. The next significant part of my life is probably going to school, and it seemed to me that I always went to school where there were 1,000 other kids. So I went to these big schools, and I was a very small boy. I was the smallest kid in a class of 1,000, and it was overwhelming. I did really nothing outstanding in all the way from kindergarten to graduate from high school. I mean, I was just
So you were in school in the same area from
same
kindergarten
area, yes,
in Newton?
in Newton. You know, at different schools,
Right.
but I all the way through till I graduated from Newton High School. And unlike Helena, I wasn't a very outgoing person, and I had some difficulty, joining in on things.
Really?
So it was kind of isolating. And so it wasn't until I went to prep school at the end of high school, and I went to prep school because I had applied to 3 colleges, and each college said, look, your grades are fine, your SATs are fine, but you haven't done anything. So we don't know who you are. And we want to know, that defines who you are.
Yeah. Where'd you apply?
Bowdoin, Middlebury, and Wesleyan.
Right.
Um,
What was the application process like? Did you have to get write an essay with letters of recommendation, or was it just like SAT and grades? And
no, I had to write a dissertation, or not a dissertation. I had to write something I did that was important to me. And the only thing I had done was I took apart a car and put it back together by myself.
Really? What kind of car?
It was a 1937 Ford.
Wow.
And I had bought a 1933 Ford, and I put the two together because each one had some good features
Yeah.
and bad features.
Yeah. I'm sure.
But anyway, the admissions people were not really impressed. They said, well, why don't you leave that to Ford and General Motors?
Yeah.
Because we don't give a damn whether you can fix a car or not. So anyway, so I ended up doing really nothing at all the way through school until I got to Wilbraham Academy, where is now 40 kids in the graduating class.
So what was that like, going from thousands of kids to that really intimate setting?
Right, the whole school is like 200 kids.
Yeah. So what was that change like?
Well, I knew everybody, and actually I could do things. I had learned to play tennis, and I got on the school tennis team. I had played a little football in high school, not on a team, but intramurally, and I tried out for the football team there, and they had a JV team, which, the biggest kid weighed 150 pounds, and I was elected captain of the team.
Oh wow.
Not because I was the best, but because I played it harder than anybody else. I was making up for all those years in high school and doing anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a kind of a turning point, and that I said, give me the right circumstances, I can do something, but not in this group of 1,000. Of course, no one ever told me there was 150 million Americans to compete with that. Anyway, after I got out of college, your mother and I got married, and we didn't know each other very well.
Right. You're talking about Helena, my grandma. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you meet her?
I met her at a inn on the Cape. She had her grandmother stayed there and got her a job there, and my mother had a friend who knew some people there, and so we just was fortuitous. We just happened to end up in the same same inn, and uh, the um, the inn had a tennis court, which no one ever played because the average age of the guests was about 100.
Right.
So your mother and I and two other kids redid this tennis court ourselves. You know,
Yeah,
brushed it,
you relayed it, yeah.
lined it, and tamped it down.
It's
And
impressive.
then we played tennis together for like every single day because we didn't have any, we didn't have any significant time off. You couldn't take off for the evening.
Yeah,
You were there
yeah,
all the time,
right.
except for a couple of hours in the afternoon we played tennis. So your mother and I played tennis with Max and one other guy every day. We got to be pretty good. But as always, your grandmother was always a better tennis player than I was. And it got to be irritating. I mean, I was bigger
Yeah,
and stronger, but I wasn't as smart. Anyway, um, it wasn't long before Ed arrived, and then about 20 minutes later, Todd arrived, and then 2 years later, Lilo arrived.
and how was that, raising your first child and then immediately, having another one? What was that kind of like, becoming a new father?
Well, you were talking about it last night, how your mother, your grandmother, was very engaging, and we got married, and my idea was that I had to get ahead in business
Right.
banking, and so that was the thing that was the most important to me, and she was secondary to that.
So did you got this job in banking at the same time you were having a child, or which one came first, and how did that?
Well, I got the job, and then Ed was married. She was pregnant when I got the job, and had Ed in September, and I had been working since July 1st or something.
Okay.
But what happened is that, and then we bought a little farm together, and all of a sudden, this young woman, who's 23, who was a big deal at the University of Michigan, was now stuck in this little farm, and she never saw anything that had four legs, so it was a real shock,
Yeah.
And now she's pregnant.
Yeah.
She didn't know anything about pregnancy,
Right.
And her mother had never taught her anything about anything, so she was, kind of isolated on this farm, and it made a deep impression on her that suddenly a bunch of her life had been cut off.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, Todd was born like a year and a half later. So here's Ed, who's this big, and
Right.
suddenly we got Todd.
Yeah.
And so Helen was really good with Doss. I mean, he was really the important person in her life. And then Todd came along, who has a totally different personality. I mean, if I can say anything about Ed, he's a negotiator. Todd is a bulldog. Todd makes up his mind what he's going to do without thinking one way or the other, just doing it. And so he was a much more difficult kid to deal with. Fortunately, it took, then we had some space before Lilo arrived.
Yeah.
And Lilo, your grandmother was sick of boys at this point, so having a girl was really a plus.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned, uh, kind of Helena and the kids being secondary to your new career. Why was that? Why was a career more priority? Just because you had to put food on the table and everything like that?
Well, you have to think of the context of the 19, we're talking the 60s here.
Yeah.
And, you went to college, uh, you got married, and you got a job, and the most important thing is to get ahead with whatever your business, whether it's medicine or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That is the most important thing.
Right, and you shared that ambition.
Well, I fell for the line.
So you kind of felt that societal pressure to.
No, I mean, if I had looking back where I am today, I'd say, wait a minute, the job thing's not going to work until you get the marriage thing squared away.
Right.
So, and I didn't get that. So it wasn't, and meanwhile, your grandmother, has gotten in touch with the Unitarian Church and suddenly realizes that she has something to offer the world. And so she goes for it. And so I became much less important to her. The marriage
So
became...
what year? This was 1960.
1970.
Okay.
The marriage is no longer the big thing. You need to take care of the kids, and I got my career, and you do whatever you want.
So the kind of affection between you two started to fade through the latter half of the 60s, and then it wasn't really a great marriage in the early 70s. Is that like kind of correct?
It was a little more subtle than that. It didn't like go.
Yeah. Understood.
But I remember it. I later thought back of before your mother and I got married. We had an interview with the Episcopal minister at the church, a young guy, and he brought us in, and we had a cup of coffee together, and he said, this marriage stuff is pretty serious.
Yeah.
You two kids know what do you think you know what you're doing? And I looked at your Helena and I said, yeah. And she said, sure, I know. Well, that was the biggest bunch of horse shit there ever was. I mean, we had absolutely no idea what to expect, who the other person was.
Yeah.
And we didn't know very much about ourselves.
So how long had you known each other before you got married?
Not too long.
Like a year?
Or probably 2 years.
2 years?
But she's either in Chicago or University of Michigan, and I'm in either Boston or Wesleyan.
Right.
So,
not spending a lot of time
no,
together?
There's no letter writing. There's no emailing. There's a phone call once in a while. There's no... She came and visited us in Newton, spent a week in Newton, and I spent a week out in Chicago. But it wasn't like, it was a romance. I mean, at 7 o'clock at night, Russ said, Tim, go into that room there, I'm locking the door. There was no kind of time to be alone, romantic, or talk about things. It was very isolated. Anyway, so it didn't occur to me at the time, but now I see at 87 how very different my children are from each other. And like Doss is a dreamer, Todd is a Panzer tank, and Leela is a very thoughtful, solid person. still doesn't do anything in my mind that is spirit of the moment. It is much, she's always thinking about the consequences of things where neither Todd or Ed ever thought about the consequences of anything they ever did. So, that's kind of an aside, because now the marriage is coming apart.
And this is 1970.
1970.
Okay.
So we had just built a beautiful house in Southborough, nice town.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lovely house, very modern, not terribly big, but modern. In a pretty nice neighborhood, kind of woodsy, and with 2 or 3 families around who had kids. And the kids were in a series, we talked about last night, a series of private schools. And we had a golden retriever. I mean, what else do you need?
Yeah, there you go. All American family.
You got the woods, you got the house, you got the kids, you got the job, now you have a little bit of money, and all of a sudden the whole thing blows up. And, the next thing I know, the kids are gone to Washington, and I'm in an apartment all by myself in Worcester. And, it was a wrench.
So you got the divorce, and then Helena got custody of the kids?
Yes.
Were you allowed to see them every so often, or how did that work?
She had custody of the kid legally,
mm-hmm.
of the children. And in Massachusetts, we discussed about joint custody, but at least that time on the law, the law favored the custody going to the mother.
Right.
Like fathers were just.
Right, yeah. I would assume it's probably similar now. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I visited the kids in Washington, D.C., 4 or 5 times, maybe, over a period of 2 or 3 years, before they moved to Schenectady, and then I saw them a bit more.
Okay.
But it was a bad.
Yeah, how was that for you emotionally? I mean, it must have been kind of difficult, seeing your kids all the time and not being able to see them at all.
Yeah. As irritating as kids can be once in a while, when they're not there, it's a real hole. Well, that's for me. So the next 10 years, I live in a series of apartments with Dave Maynard, another guy, a friend of mine at work, went through a divorce.
So you're how old at this point?
72, 73.
So
how old am I?
Yeah, how old were you in that year?
I'm 73, and I was born in 73, 36, 30 years old.
Something like that, yeah. Okay.
Anyway, during that 10 years, I had I had injured my back, and I was sent to the hospital, and they wanted to do some surgery on my neck, and they assigned me to a physical therapist who happened to be Jackie. And so I went to see Jackie for like 2 years, and another therapist doing a little different kind of therapy for 2 years. So I was kind of there's a whole lot of things I couldn't do for a couple of years.
How did that injury come about?
I was in a I was in a seminar, and I was lying on the floor with my head up against that couch, and I was doing this to my neck without knowing it, and I did it for so long I slipped a disc.
Oh wow. Okay.
So anyway, Jackie, we got to know each other pretty well, and she said, whatever you do, don't let them do any surgery that far up in your neck. Because if they make a mistake this far up, you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's down here, it's different.
What was your first impression of Jackie?
Well, she was like, just got out of college.
Okay. So
I'm
younger.
now, what I say, 19, what are we, 70, say 72.
So you
so
were
that's-
26,
Yeah.
maybe?
Well, 39 from
Oh yeah, you were born in 39, right?
36.
36. So
Yeah.
if it's 72, then it's
Yeah.
36, or it's
I'm about 36.
okay. Got it.
She's only just out of college. She's 23.
Okay.
And so, you know, at first I thought, oh my God, they've assigned me this kid right out of kindergarten. But anyway, we got along, and I saw her after, twice a week for an hour each. We got to be, friendly and talk about things, and at the end of 2 years, I said, "How would you like to have dinner?" And she said, I can't have any relationship with a client." So finally I got better, and we had dinner, and Jackie and I got to be lovers and spent a good deal of time together. And then she spent quite a bit of time not quite a bit of time, but the 3 kids came down to Newton, where I was living at the time. And then Jackie the light bulb went on, and she said, I don't want to get married to this old man who has these 3 kids that aren't even mine. I want to start over again and have my own family, whatever. So she said, I'll see you.
Oh wow.
It wasn't a good day. It was not a good day. However, at least they were just the 2 of us. There was no other children or anything.
Right.
And then, we went to Star Island, and this is a couple of years after, it was in 1975, and Leela and I went to Star Island. The boys went to camp or had little jobs or something.
Okay.
So just Leela and I went up there, and Leela was assigned a room with Peggy O'Connell, Winston's daughter.
Right.
Winston was off in another building with her little girl, Amanda. So, and Peggy had scoliosis, really.
Yeah.
And she had this brace, went from here to here. And she just got the thing before they came up there, and she didn't really know how to get into it. So Leela would come over to my room in the morning and said, "Dad, Peggy can't get into her brace. Just come over and help." So I go over and help Peggy get into her brace every morning.
Yeah.
So after a while I said, "You have a mother?" So then they introduced me to Winston.
Yeah.
And Winston had just had a radical mastectomy, and she was dealing with that, and it was very, very difficult. and her husband just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
So I happened to be there at the right time to listen to the whole story, and I was a much better listener than her husband was. And so we started a relationship that lasted for about 4 years, and we bought a house together in Heinsberg, Vermont. Kids would come up, not often, but they would come up because she had 4 kids.
Right. And you had 3 kids.
And I had 3 kids. And so, you know, Little and Todd and Ed came up not once a month, but every 6 weeks or so.
So this is in like
Maybe.
the 80s, early 80s?
This is 75, 76, 77, 78, 79. And the problem we ran into is that we were in kind of a recession.
Right.
And getting a job in banking in Vermont was like, forget it.
Exactly, right.
You'd have to start all over again. And I still start with them. I know what the treasury bills were like.
Yeah.
What's starting over about? And they say, well, you probably have to start over by opening a pizza parlor.
What?
So, I mean, that's what we have to do.
Wow.
So that didn't appeal to me at all.
Yeah.
So Winston and I kind of drifted apart because you know I was driving up there every weekend. So it's like coming from Boston to here every Friday night. I did it for the better part of 3 years, and then we decided that, you know, this ain't gonna work. And she met a guy who had some fairly serious money, and so she had someplace to go.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, I came back to Worcester. Jackie, in the meantime, had gotten married.
Right.
And gotten divorced.
Oh, all in that, okay. And that was a couple of years, okay.
5 years.
Got it.
So Jackie and I got together again. This is 1980.
Okay.
And I bought the farm. And then I bought the farm in 1980. And in 1982, Jackie finished her graduate school and came to live at the farm.
Yeah.
And went to work at the Worcester School System.
What kind of animals did you have on the farm?
We had sheep, pigs, chickens, peahens, and I don't know what else, but one of the funny stories is that I went down and bought these 2 piglets, about this big.
Yeah.
And I arrived with my BMW. And the farmer said, what are you going to do? How are you going to get these pigs home? I said, I'm going to put them in the back seat. He kind of shook his head and said, I don't think that's going to work. So he put the pigs in a bag, each one on a separate thing, and put them in a trunk. At which point, this frightened the pigs, and so they pooped all over. I mean, it was awful. So Leo and I, she was, I don't know why she was there that particular weekend, but she was there, and we took the pigs out and we put them in the barn with a bunch of food and hay and stuff. It was a great place, and cleaned them up as best we could. And then about 5 o'clock, the temperature started to drop. And Leo said, you know, how cold can it be before these pigs get frozen? I said, I have no idea. So Leo and I each picked up a pig and brought the pigs into the house. and we locked them in the room like that vestibule out there,
Yeah.
and put some hay down on the floor, and closed the doors so they couldn't get out into the house.
Yeah.
Next day we went out there, and it was a coat room. They had all these coats saying, the pigs had gotten up and pulled all the coats off the wall and made a big nest in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
And then pigs are very clean, so they go over in one corner and pee and poop, and they never got their bed soiled.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, our clothes smelled like we lived in a farm, a barn. It was awful. Anyway,
is that is that one of your favorite memories of the farm? Just, I mean, those are. Seems like there's some wild stories from that time.
There are, who go on forever.
I'm sure, yeah.
But anyway, then at that point, Leela had graduated. When did you graduate from Syracuse?
December 85.
85. And then she went to work in New York. And I'm trying to think and then you went out west.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, and that the company blew up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you came back to and stayed with us at the farm for a year.
What were Todd and Ed up to at this point?
Ed has set up a theater in Worcester, and he was kind of the manager of the theater, live theater. He had a set design is what he learned in college, so he used that, but he's also going to manage the whole process other than directing the plays.
Yeah.
Todd, in the meantime, had gotten had met Jody and was living at the Tonellis, and he was working as a surveyor. He worked for a surveying company.
Right. And you're with Jackie at this point?
Yeah. Well, Jackie didn't arrive in North Brookfield until 82. And we got married in 82, and once we got married, she stayed there. And then in 84, we adopted Zachary.
How was that process? Did you go to Brazil, or was Jackie that you went as well?
We went through an American adoption agency who had some contact with a woman in Brazil, and it took about a year to get approved.
Yeah.
And we got Zachary and brought him back. He was only 6 weeks old.
Where in Brazil was he from?
Natal.
Natal.
Out on the Atlantic side where it humps out.
Yeah.
Recife. It's over there.
How long were you down there for?
We were down there for about 2 weeks, going through the process.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Zachary had an allergic to cow's milk.
That is an issue on a farm, typically, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Was it
so he was sick all the time.
Right. Was it Jackie's idea to adopt?
Yes.
And
I didn't really want to adopt. I mean, I got these 3 kids. Plenty.
Yeah. So what were you thinking with having a new baby coming in from Brazil? That must have been.
Well, I mean, it was like she said, there's no point in getting married if you're not going to have a child.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if you want to marry this girl, you're going to have another child. That's simple. So, I did everything to support her to have this child. And she had endometriosis and couldn't have children.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it was even more, adoption was really the only recourse
Right.
for her.
Right.
And anyway, so we adopted Zach, and the kids came to the farm a lot because Rudy and your mother had broken up. There's no home left in Schenectady. Helen was living in, I don't know where, but anyway, Leela and Ed and Doss are around quite a bit.
Yeah.
And in fact, at one point, Leela came home and we gave her one of the bedrooms. We had a extra bedroom out in the wing. And I said, maybe you'd like to paint it your favorite color. And I came in the room and Leela had painted the room this color. And I said, it was like, I said, are you feeling a little depressed? She said, yes, I am. I think she said that. And
That's a little dramatic.
I said, either we get her a psychiatrist or a whole bunch of white paint, one or the other. But anyway, but it wasn't long after that she met Mike. And she was working in Boston.
Yeah.
Commuting back to North Brookfield, and Mike lives halfway in between.
Right.
So there were some nights that Leo didn't come all the way home. He stayed in Waltham. And I decided wisely to keep my mouth shut and enjoy her when she did get sick of Waltham.
There you go.
Anyway. And then, I don't know what year that was, but then they decided to get married 1993, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember North Brookfield, but it had a long sloping lawn. And Leela said, well, or somebody said, you can't have a wedding on a sloping lawn. You're gonna have to level it. So the first thing for Leo's wedding is a bulldozer that costs about $80 a minute. Tore out of a whole damn lawn.
Yeah.
And we had to cut down a couple of trees. We had to take the garage down because it was right in the middle of the wedding place, right?
Yeah.
Yep. We had built a beautiful tree house for Zachary with 3 trees. It cut 3 trees down and promised Zachary, a Maserati to make up for it. Anyway, actually that was probably one of the highlights of the family was having that wedding at the house.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I had let's see, Helena was around there. Roz came down to take a look at things. Jackie's runs the household.
Right.
And me trying to decide how to do this wedding. And at one point, Roz said, I'd like the decor to be the blue and gold of Notre Dame. Which meant that all the tablecloths was going to be blue with the gold trim and stuff. I said, and meanwhile, Helena is there, and Zachary took a dislike to her for whatever reason, I don't know. But they got in a couple of verbal go-arounds who were like, and Jackie was, bent out of shape that Helena walks in there and tells her kid what to do.
Yeah.
So anyway,
That's a tough position for you.
I hired a woman to run it. So when
Okay.
Jackie says I want the colors to be University of Connecticut, I would just refer to this woman and say, "Look, I don't make those decisions."
There you go.
This woman
Yeah,
does it."
to defer that blame. There you go.
Anyway, it worked out very well. And
Wedding turned out well. Did you make a speech?
I don't know.
I think you wrote a poem, one of your poems. We have somewhere.
Say again.
You wrote one of your poems.
I did.
Yeah,
You still got it?
probably somewhere.
You read a lot of poems.
Good. We wrote a lot of poems those days, yes. Anyway, I was in the farm until 2000, 20 years, and we did a lot to that place. Put in a pool.
Yeah.
Did beautiful gardens. Fixed up the barn. At one point, we had 27 animals, and it was like, it was a lot of work. After about 10 years, Jackie's life got very medically oriented. I mean, she worked as a special needs teacher during the day, and at night, or on weekends, she worked at Memorial Hospital. So she got really kind of disinterested in the farm.
Okay.
It was just too much for her to do.
Yeah.
So she kind of went off on her own, whatever. And I'm just retiring from the Bank of America, and Winston calls me and says I just got a divorce. Helen, Jackie, Winston.
Quite the womanizer there, got
It's
to say.
like a tennis match.
Yeah, there you go.
So I said, I was working for Tom Bartholomew at the time, and I said, I would talk to her on the phone once in a while, and I said to her one day, I said, if you ever come up with $1 million, call me, and I'll manage the money for you. But I don't want to hear about $25,000.
Who is this? This is Tom Bartholomew?
This is, I was at Tom Bartholomew's company,
Got it.
working after I retired from Bank of America.
Who is Tom Bartholomew?
He was the guy that worked with me at the Bank of America.
Okay.
He got fired. He left. I got fired. And I had this conversation with Winston, who lived up in Vermont.
Yeah.
Still, she had married and was divorced.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I said, anytime that you come across $1 million, let me know and I'll manage it for you. So phone rings one day. He said, Tim, you remember the thing about $1 million? I got it.
There you go.
So I said, great. So she opened an account, and then we, kind of renewed
Yeah.
everything. And
Right.
And then when I got to be 65, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I left. Jackie and I got divorced.
This was 2000?
2000.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to Vermont and lived there in Burlington for a year, and then we bought this house and developed it. So 2000 to 2019 were the most peaceful part of my life.
Yeah.
We have a relationship with Winston, which is really good, and a very different personality than either Helena or Jackie, both of which were kind of, fist slammers, like, this is what we're going to do, period.
Yeah.
Where Winston was much more when you got an idea, we'll talk about it. You know.
Yeah.
Much less confrontational than either of the. And you know, I said, well, I didn't think they made women like that. They did. So, but anyway, that was. That went on until she died in 2019. And that was, I wrote down what I thought. We're going too long here.
No, you're good.
Good.
Yeah.
I wrote down, you know, what I thought were some of the 3 or 4 of the high points in my life, and 4 or 5 of the worst.
Yeah.
And the low, I'll do the low points because it's good to end on the high points. One of the lowest points was my divorce from Helena, where there were 3 kids and a golden retriever one day, and there's nothing the next.
Yeah.
And I was totally unprepared for those things.
Yeah. How did that impact you emotionally? I guess you just, I mean, you were obviously alone, and that must have been difficult, just going from the whole family to nobody.
Exactly. It's like the room you had in New York with no window.
Yeah, that's right. Something like that.
Right.
Did you like learn anything about yourself during that time? Were you when you were just, you know, kind of isolated? Like, how did you learn anything from that kind of isolation?
I joined a bunch of things. I started playing golf. I joined a gym class, and not every day, but twice a week went over with a bunch of guys and did running and jumping and whatever.
Yeah.
I bought I joined a group of what was it they called consciousness raising for men, and the idea was in the long haul that you actually could talk to a woman as if she was a human being, you know.
Yeah.
And I got made some really good friends during that. So I kind of, you know, you're gonna be stuck in this room with no windows, or you better get the hell out here.
Yeah.
And start doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I met the guy across the street from me in Newton, when I was living there, had a stepsister who owned a sailboat in Salem Harbor, and she and I got to be good friends, and we sailed all over the place in that boat. I'm sure Lilo remembers a couple of hairy sailing trips out there. Anyway.
Yeah.
I grasped onto some things that I never would otherwise.
I think you probably just need some kind of social connection that you were deprived of from, you know, losing the whole family.
Right.
So yeah,
I mean, exactly. It's like a death.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the other thing that the next thing is Winston's death was also a real blow, and she had been going downhill for 3 years, and I'd been, you know, kind of taking care of her. Not quite the same way as Connie, who doesn't have mobility, but she is, you know, she hasn't lost any brain power. Winston started having his little strokes and things where she couldn't converse or she'd come
Yeah.
come to a word and a word disappeared on her.
Yeah.
And we went through some really bad times with medicines that were just killers.
Yeah.
So she was sickle.
Yeah. How did that impact you emotionally?
Well, you could see her on the bathroom floor throwing up into the toilet at 2 a.m. And she didn't realize it, but I could see, a year and a half ahead of time that this can't go on forever.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are two of the divorce. My mother's death was, which I hadn't mentioned before, but Leila, I'm sure, remembers that the three of the kids, Helen had married Rudy, and that they were to leave. They were going on vacation at Christmas time. We're going to leave the three kids with me for the Christmas holiday. And the kids arrived about 9 o'clock in the morning, and my mother died at 8 o'clock in the morning. Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
She had a heart attack, or as far as we know, she had a heart attack and a cerebral hemorrhage at the same time, which she never knew what hit her. Bang!
Were you close with her growing up?
Yeah. Yeah, I was much closer to my mother than my father. And everybody loved my mother. She was just the most...
All right, you were talking about
So,
your mom dying and that whole situation.
yeah. And the kids, Leila and Todd and Ann really loved her. I mean, she was partially crippled. She had polio in her knee, and it was locked. She couldn't bend it. But she would get down on the floor with the three kids and play with them. And she was then 75. No, she died when she was 75. But until she was 75. So right through she died, she got down and did things with the kids. And the only thing other negative thing is the loss of hearing is a very isolating kind of experience.
Yeah, I'm sure. When did that start?
Mm-hmm.
When did that start?
Probably about 10 years ago. And it wasn't really bad until about 5 years ago. And then I went and then I got hearing aids, which were all right. And I wore those for 2 or 3 years. And then I went and got some really top of the line hearing aids.
Yeah.
And I could, if I'm in a room with you or another person, and you're sitting close enough so I can see your facial expression while you're speaking, I can communicate pretty well. But like last night, we're kind of chit-chatting while we're playing the game. We're kind of giggling over the fact that this hand is, and I had left one of my hearing aids out. So what happens is I hear part of the story, but I want the whole story, so I make it up in my head.
Yes,
there's nothing to do with
it. Turns out pretty funny though sometimes.
Yeah.
It turns out pretty funny.
Sometimes it's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure that's not a lot of fun when you can't hear anything around you.
Say again?
I said it's not a lot of fun when you can't hear anything.
Right. And once I take my hearing aids out, everything is, I can't hear anything. I'm totally unless I'm sitting right next to you. So, but those are the bad things. I jotted down some of the, what I thought were the highlights.
Yeah.
I think one of them was canoeing down the Saco River with Leela and the boys. And the first time we did it, I did it with just the boys, because Leela was too little.
Yeah.
She stayed with Nan, and I went down with the boys. And then the next year, the boys and Leela and I went down together. Is that right?
I guess so.
Okay. Well, that was one I thought was real. It was kind of like 3 kids in a canoe, and we didn't know a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been on Lewis and Clark. We didn't know anything about bears or wildlife or cooking or anything. And then after I met Winston, we did the same thing, only we did it with all the O'Connells, and it was kind of fun with 7 kids, and we still didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And it was hectic, but it was fun with all the kids together and on the canoe. So that's 2 of them. I'd forgotten Layla had been on the Allagash, but that was much later. Much later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she survived the Allagash because of her experience on the cycle. And there was one funny thing that happened, or one of the many funny things. I went one year with Bob Lincoln and his son, and Leila and Todd, and we had bought a bottle of vodka. And we got to this campsite, made the campsite, and Bob said, now's the time to have vodka. These kids got their tents set up, they're all set.
Yeah.
We started cooking. Bob says, where is the vodka? And I said, oh, Jesus, I don't remember. So we started looking around and could not find the bottle of vodka. So Bob and I think we left it in the car.
Yeah.
We get in the canoe and paddle upstream for about a mile. Get to the car. Car's locked. I said, Bob, you got the keys? It's his car.
Yeah.
He said, no, there's my sleeping bag. Back in the canoe, down the river, get the keys, back up the river, unlock the car, no vodka. Back and down the river again, and at which point Leela has not finished unpacking. She says, she finishes unpacking and she reaches and pulls out the bottle of vodka. She said, Daddy, is this what you're looking for?
That was great.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leela. And the other thing was, when Leela and Das happened to graduate at the same time from college, and we went to Italy, the 3 of us, for 3 weeks. Not just Italy, but mostly Italy. And it was really, we were in Florence for the first 5 days, which is like being in a museum.
Yeah.
And I remember we went into is it the Uffizi? Is that the name of it? Anyway, there's a statue of David there.
Yeah, sure.
The guy with his arm cut off.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And
Absolutely.
This naked statue, and I remember Leela walking in and looking at him and saying, oh my. Anyway, you probably don't remember
That's
saying.
great. That's great.
But then we went over to Venice for another 5 days. And we didn't have there was no GPS. We didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I don't think we even had a map.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're wandering around in the woods somewhere in the middle of Italy. We came to the farmhouse, and everybody speaks Italian. We speak Italian. So all we wanted was directions. So we sent Leela up this driveway
Alone.
alone. Right? Speaking of dogs.
Sorry.
I mean, but Ed and I sit in the car. We sent Leela, go up there and find out where the hell supposed to go. Leela came back, well, because she spoke French. And there was a chance that they would speak some French.
Yeah.
Leela comes back about 45 minutes later. They gave her a glass of wine. She came back. I said, what did you find out? She said, I don't know. I have no idea. So we stuck Leo in the back, had a glass of wine as useless. And just kept driving until we got to Venice. And then we spent, like, every day, we would spend walking around trying to find the best restaurant. And Jody, who had spent a lot of time in Italy, knew about all these restaurants that the public didn't know about.
Yeah.
And we ate like kings for a week. And the last thing that was kind of a highlight for me was Winston and I spent a week in, I don't know, 3 weeks in Belize doing staying at various kind of resorts.
Yeah.
And did some rafting through tunnels under the ground.
Yeah.
We did exploration of Mayan buildings. It was a really it's a beautiful country that's totally undeveloped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was good.
I just have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3. Just I guess, you've lived a long life loved and lost a lot of different people. What's your like proudest moment, your biggest triumph? What, in your own words?
Well, I think that I think that I sometimes wondered if Doss, Leela, and Todd would survive.
Yeah.
I mean, there was such uproar in their lives. Good schooling, bad schooling, no schooling, police, drugs, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember one time that Doss said to me, he said, Todd is stealing bikes and remaking them and selling them. And I said to Todd, when I was selling them, I said, is that true? He said, yeah, it's true. But better than Ed was stealing cars. And I'm thinking, Jesus, is this family ever going to make it, or are we going to end all up with a number in a cell without any windows?
Yeah. So
the thing that now impresses me is the fact that I have now 7, but really 6 grandchildren who are, to the best of my knowledge, on a good trajectory. Everybody's either has a good job or has a good relationship with someone. So I've sort of gone from the brink of what could be disaster to a family that, while they're not around each other very much, there's a lot of success for these grandchildren.
Yeah, that's great.
Um, so I can only take credit for it in the sense of genealogically. I mean, I didn't do anything. It's all happens because it was the genes were aligned somehow or other. So I can't really take any credit for it, but I'm certainly delighted that um, they are where they are, and you're the second grandchild who has wanted to find out more about the grandfather, because there's some interest there. I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe you can tell me.
I think you're an interesting guy with a lot of great life experience, and I don't know. I always remember you having the best stories. I remember coming here in the summer, reading a lot of these great books, watching movies with you. It's a great experience. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I wrote it seems to me every time we had a Christmas or a Thanksgiving together, we would have some kind of a poem. Sometimes the kids did, sometimes I did, and we did some. Some of them were just the dumbest thing you've ever heard, but laugh. And there's that one that you framed for me that's down in Safety Harbor, where each of the Madison and you and Mike and Leo all put in, and it looks like a poem written by 4 different people, all of whom were had a glass of wine. I mean, it just is poetically,
Yeah.
it is a train wreck, but it's got such nice thoughts in it that it's a real, honor to have some of your family do that. I think that one of the things that today is the most distressing to me is that at 87 years old, the prospect of living to 90, or which could happen, and as you get older, your mobility decreases, your energy decreases. You know, the future. You're looking ahead at the beginning. I'm looking at the last of everything.
Yeah.
And so I'm lucky. I have never been seriously sick. And they tell me I'm fairly decent health. But I don't want to go on ad nauseum. Just end up in the room with no window.
That's fair. I got 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same vein as what you just touched on. You've lived a very long life. A lot of things have happened. What's your biggest regret?
My basic what?
Your biggest regret.
There's a lot of them. I think the biggest regret is the failed marriage with your grandmother. If if I look back and say, if we had known more, if we'd been more mature, we would have kept the marriage and the family together. And while, I've had other relationships which, in a couple of cases, proved that Helena's and my relationship wasn't the best. On the other hand, there were 3 other kids, there were 3 other people involved. And I, for better or worse, I missed out on a lot of their life. And I, essentially, I didn't, I wasn't Leela's father for the time she was 6 till she was 16. And I think that, when you're 6, your personality is not formed yet. It's very fluid. And I miss all those years. And you can't make them up. So, I'll just glad to see Leela when she comes up.
Last question.
Last question.
Advice to young people on how to live a good life.
Advice to the young people.
Advice to young people on how to live a good life.
I think trying to see the other person's point of view, to be tolerant of something that may apparently is disagreeable. Is it disagreeable because it's disagreeable, or is it because I can't see the way you see it? So the advice would be to listen carefully to what the other person, where they're coming from. Because essentially we all have something to contribute, and so often you cut people off because they don't agree with you. On the other hand, I think all those people who believe in Donald Trump are assholes.
All right, that's good.
Okay.